The morning sun stretched across the small town of Brenton, gilding the rooftops in soft amber light. The Turner household sat quietly at the edge of town, where the cobblestone streets gave way to open fields, and the wind carried both the scent of wildflowers and the faint hum of passing trains. To outsiders, the house appeared peaceful, perhaps even ordinary. But within its walls, a story was unfolding that would stretch across years, shaping the fragile threads of love, trust, and the complicated relationship between a daughter and her parents. Clara Turner had always been the pride of her family. From the moment she learned to walk, she carried herself with a curious boldness that set her apart from other children. Her mother, Evelyn, often watched with admiration, though sometimes tinged with worry, as Clara questioned everything around her. Why the sky shifted colors at dusk, why flowers leaned toward the sun, why people worked tirelessly only to complain about their lives afterward. "She's a thinker," Evelyn would whisper to her husband, Samuel, at night when Clara was asleep. "She doesn't just accept the world. She wants to understand it." Samuel, a man hardened by years of labor in the railway workshops, had simpler expectations. He wanted Clara to grow into someone steady, reliable, the kind of daughter who would respect her roots and never forget where she came from. He didn't say much, but his silence always carried weight. When he did speak, Clara listened, partly out of respect, partly out of the heavy air that followed his rare words. As Clara grew older, the invisible rope between her and her parents began to tighten and fray at the same time. At 16, she started dreaming beyond Brenton, beyond the small routines and repetitive conversations of their modest life. She longed for cities filled with lights, voices in different languages, opportunities that seemed infinite. She wanted to escape the unspoken rules that tethered her parents to duty and sacrifice. Evelyn noticed the restless spark first. At dinner, while Samuel cut his bread with deliberate precision, Clara would stare out the window, her food untouched. "Eat, darling," Evelyn would remind her gently, though she already knew the meal wasn't the problem. It was the horizon. Too close, too limiting for a girl whose mind was already chasing something distant. Arguments began subtly. Clara wanted to join a writing club in the city, 2 hours away. Samuel objected immediately. "You have responsibilities here," he said firmly. "The world isn't waiting to hand you dreams on a silver plate." "But I'm not asking for a silver plate," Clara shot back, her voice trembling with both fear and defiance. "I just want a chance to try. Don't you understand?" Samuel's jaw tightened. Evelyn sat between them, her hands folded in silence, feeling as though she were watching a storm build, one she had no power to stop. By the time Clara turned 18, the storm finally broke. She was accepted into a university in the capital, a place far larger and louder than anything she had ever known. Samuel refused to celebrate. He didn't forbid her from going. He couldn't, but his silence was heavier than any words of encouragement. Evelyn hugged Clara tightly before she left, whispering promises that she'd always be proud of her no matter what. The city overwhelmed Clara at first, but soon it became her oxygen. She thrived on the chaos, the endless streets, the freedom of anonymity. She wrote articles that caught the attention of small magazines. She met friends who encouraged her ambitions instead of questioning them. Every late-night cafe conversation, every rejection letter followed by a small victory, made her feel alive in a way Brenton never had. But success came with distance, not just in miles, but in spirit. Phone calls home became shorter. Messages went unanswered for days. When Evelyn reminded her gently of Samuel's birthdays or the town festivals, Clara often responded with excuses. "I'll try next time, Mom. I'm just so busy." Samuel stopped asking. He built a wall of silence, convincing himself that this was what he had expected all along. Children leaving, forgetting. Evelyn, however, kept the fragile bridge alive, sending letters filled with warmth, stories of the garden, the neighbors, even the family dog who still waited at the gate every evening as though Clara might appear. Years passed. Clara's name began to circulate more widely in literary circles. She published essays that resonated with people across the country. She was invited to speak at conferences, her picture appearing in glossy magazines. She told herself she was finally becoming the person she always wanted to be. Yet late at night, when the applause faded and the hotel rooms felt unbearably empty, A shadow pressed against her heart that it was during one of these lonely nights, staring at her reflection in a city high-rise. That Clara realized she had missed her father's retirement, her mother's 50th birthday, and the news that their family dog had passed away. All of it had slipped past while she chased her ambitions, telling herself she was too busy, too important, too far removed. When Evelyn's voice cracked on the phone one evening, "Clara, your father's health. It's not what it used to be," Clara froze. For the first time in years, the unstoppable rhythm of her life stuttered. She hung up and stared at her calendar, filled with deadlines, meetings, interviews. None of them seemed to matter as much as the silence that followed her mother's words. The weight of years unspoken, of pride and distance, began to settle over her like a fog. She thought of the little house on the edge of Brenton, the kitchen table where her father ate in silence, the window where her mother watched her gaze at horizons. She wondered if it was too late to return, too late to repair the threads she had let unravel. Clara lay awake until dawn, the city buzzing outside her window, and for the first time in her adult life, she longed not for skyscrapers or applause, but for the steady heartbeat of home. The decision to return home was not made in a single moment, though it felt that way in Clara's mind. It was more like 1,000 small pieces, fragments of guilt, love, and longing, finally stitching themselves together into something undeniable. That phone call with her mother was the spark, but the embers had been glowing for years. She bought the train ticket almost on impulse, her hands trembling as she entered her payment details. She had told herself she was simply visiting for a few days, a brief pause in her whirlwind life. But deep down she knew she was searching for something much heavier: redemption. The train ride back to Brenton was long and unfamiliar, though she had traveled the same route countless times as a teenager. She pressed her forehead against the window, watching the cityscape dissolve into rolling hills and farmland. Each passing mile peeled away a layer of her defenses. The skyscrapers she had once adored seemed small in her memory compared to the vastness of the open fields. The closer she drew to home, the more her chest tightened. Evelyn was waiting at the small station, her hands clutched nervously around the strap of her handbag. Time had painted her hair with silver streaks and carved lines of patience around her eyes. But her smile, when it appeared, was as warm as Clara remembered. For a moment, Clara wanted to run into her mother's arms like a child, to collapse into the safety she had denied herself for so long. But instead she walked slowly, her suitcase rolling behind her like a reluctant witness. "Mom," she whispered when they finally stood face to face. "My darling girl," Evelyn said, her voice thick with unshed tears. She embraced her tightly, holding her as though she might vanish again if she let go. Clara buried her face in her mother's shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender soap. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she missed it. The drive back to the house was quiet, filled with hesitant questions and careful answers. Evelyn asked about Clara's work, her travels, her friends. Clara spoke in measured tones, glossing over the loneliness that had accompanied her success. Instead, she nodded and smiled, while her eyes traced the roadsides, each turn sparking memories of childhood bike rides and summer evenings. When the car pulled into the driveway, Clara's breath caught. The house looked smaller than she remembered, yet it carried the same sense of permanence. The garden was a little overgrown, the paint on the porch a bit chipped, but it was still home. Samuel was sitting in his chair by the window, as he always had. His hair was whiter now, his shoulders slightly stooped, but his presence filled the space with quiet authority. He didn't rise when she entered. He looked at her with eyes that had grown more tired, yet still sharp. For a few unbearable seconds, the silence between them threatened to drown her. Then he spoke. "You came back," he said simply. "Yes," Clara replied, her throat tightening. "I'm here." He gave a small nod, then turned his gaze back toward the window. It wasn't rejection, but neither was it the warm welcome she had secretly hoped for. Still, something inside her eased. Her father had spoken to her, not with anger, but with acknowledgement. It was a start. The following days unfolded slowly, like a book she had once loved but forgotten how to read. Clara helped her mother in the kitchen, kneading dough the way she used to as a child, their hands dusted with flour as laughter bubbled between them. She sat beside her father in the evenings, not filling the air with words, but sharing the silence as he watched the fading light through the curtains the tea night. However, Clara struggled. She lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling plastered with old posters, her heart heavy with memories of arguments and slammed doors. She remembered the sting of her father's disapproval, the way she had stormed out years ago, vowing never to return. She remembered her mother's tearful pleas for peace, always caught in the crossfire. Guilt clawed at her, whispering that she could never truly repair what had been broken. One evening, unable to bear the weight, Clara found herself sitting in the garden with her mother. The stars stretched endlessly above them, just as they had when Clara was a girl. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "do you think Dad hates me?" Evelyn turned to her sharply. "No, never. He's hurt, yes. Disappointed, maybe. But hate? Never. He has always loved you, Clara. His silence. It's just his way of carrying pain." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I had to leave to find myself. I thought, if I stayed, I'd lose everything. But maybe I lost something more important by leaving." Evelyn reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You had to go? It was your journey. We don't raise children to keep them. We raise them to let them go. What matters now is that you're here. You still have time to build something new with him, if you're willing to try." The next morning, Clara decided to try. She found her father in the workshop behind the house, his hands stained with oil as he tinkered with an old clock. For a long moment, she stood silently in the doorway, watching him work. He hadn't changed much in this space. The shelves still held jars of nails and bolts. The air still smelled of wood and metal. Finally, she gathered her courage. "Dad," she said softly, "can we talk?" He didn't look up immediately, but after a pause, he set his tools aside. His eyes met hers, guarded but not unkind. "I've made mistakes," Clara confessed. "I thought I was chasing something important, but I realize now. I pushed you away. I hurt you and Mom. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Please, let me try." For a long while, Samuel said nothing. The silence stretched, and Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Then, slowly, he spoke. "You were always stubborn," he said, a faint hint of a smile ghosting across his face. "Always wanted the world to bend to you. I didn't know how to guide that fire without losing you. Maybe I was too hard. Maybe I should have said more when you needed to hear it. But you're my daughter, Clara. You'll always be my daughter." The tears broke free before she could stop them. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. For the first time in years, he held her tightly, his hands rough but steady against her back. It wasn't forgiveness spoken in grand gestures. It was quiet, raw, and real. That evening, Clara felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. The house that once felt too small now seemed like a sanctuary. She realized that the love she had been searching for in distant cities had always been rooted here, waiting patiently for her return. And though she knew her journey was far from over, she finally understood that success meant nothing without the people who had given her life meaning in the first place. Life in Brenton slowed Clara down in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first week had been filled with tentative conversations, cautious glances, and old wounds reopening before they could properly heal. But as days melted into weeks, she began to find a rhythm in the quiet life she had once dismissed as suffocating. It was strange how the very things she had once run from, the chirping of birds at dawn, the creak of the floorboards, the stillness of nights under familiar stars, now offered her a comfort she didn't know she needed. Her father, Samuel, remained a reserved presence, but there was a subtle shift between them. It was in the way he lingered a little longer at the dinner table, the way his gaze softened when she helped him in the workshop, the way he no longer avoided her eyes. He was still Samuel, stoic, deliberate, slow to reveal, but there was an undercurrent of unspoken acceptance in everything he did. And for Clara, that meant more than any apology or declaration could point. One late afternoon, Clara sat with him in the workshop as he worked on a broken music box. The small gears and springs lay scattered across the workbench, waiting to be reassembled. She watched him with quiet admiration, marveling at the patience in his hands, the steadiness that had once infuriated her but now seemed almost sacred. "Dad," she said softly, breaking the silence, "why did you keep all of these? All the clocks, the boxes, the old radios. Half of them don't even work." Samuel adjusted his glasses, his eyes fixed on the delicate gear between his fingers. "Because everything can be fixed if you take the time to understand it," he replied. People throw things away too quickly these days. They don't see the value of patience. Clara swallowed hard. His words sank deep, weighted with more meaning than he intended, or perhaps exactly as much. And what about people? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He finally looked at her, the faintest glimmer of emotion flickering in his eyes. People too, he said, her chest tightened. She wanted to cry, to thank him, to apologize again. But she didn't. Instead, she simply nodded. And for the first time in years, she felt like they understood each other without the need for more words. Her mother, Evelyn, meanwhile, flourished in Clara's presence. She cooked Clara's favorite meals, involved her in gardening, and filled the house with chatter. The bond between mother and daughter had never been broken, only strained by distance, and it rekindled quickly. Evelyn's laughter rang through the rooms, chasing away the heaviness that had lingered for years. Clara realized how much her mother had carried alone during the long silence between her and Samuel. She vowed never to let her mother bear that weight again. Yet, despite the warmth returning to her family, Clara was haunted by the thought of the life she had left behind. The city still called to her, the ambition, the career, the independence. Could she truly stay in Brenton forever? Or was she meant to return to the bustling world she had once embraced? The question gnawed at her late at night, when sleep refused to come. One evening, after helping her mother put away dishes, Clara found Samuel sitting alone on the porch, staring into the twilight. She sat beside him, the cool air wrapping around them like a fragile cloak. For a long time, they listened to the crickets, the silence between them no longer heavy but contemplative. "Do you regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Regret what?" He replied without turning his gaze. "Staying here. Not chasing. More." Samuel was quiet for a moment, then exhaled slowly. "I used to wonder, when I was younger, if I had missed something. Opportunities, adventures, maybe even greatness. But over time I realized that what I built here, this home, this family, was my more. Your mother, you. That was my greatness. And no job or city could have given me that." Clara blinked back tears. His words struck her in a way she hadn't expected. She realized that while she had been chasing success and recognition, her father had chosen roots over wings, and though she had once seen that as weakness, she now recognized it as strength. The days grew colder as autumn set in. Clara found herself drawn to small rituals she once ignored. Raking leaves with her mother, sharing hot tea with her father, walking the familiar trails of her childhood. Each act stitched another piece of her back into the fabric of home. But the city was still there, in her mind, a reminder of her independence and the version of herself she had fought to create. The turning point came one morning when Clara received a phone call from her former boss in the city. They offered her a position again, higher pay, bigger responsibilities, a chance to reclaim everything she had walked away from. She stared at the phone for hours, torn between two worlds. The old Clara would have said yes instantly. The new Clara wasn't sure. That evening, she told her parents about the offer. Evelyn looked worried, her eyes searching Clara's face for answers. Samuel simply nodded, waiting for her decision. "I don't know what to do," Clara admitted, her voice trembling. "If I stay here, I feel like I'm giving up everything I worked for. But if I leave, I'm afraid I'll lose this. You. Us. Again." Her father studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Clara, life isn't about choosing one world over the other. It's about finding a way to carry both. If you go, this home will still be here. If you stay, the world will still turn. What matters is whether you live with honesty, with yourself, and with us." Her mother reached across the table, taking Clara's hand. "We don't want to hold you back, darling. We just want you to remember that no matter where you go, this is your place. We are your place." Clara's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to choose between success and family. She could carry her family's love into whatever future she built. It wasn't an either/or, it was both. The next day, Clara called her boss back. She accepted the position, but with one condition. She would work partly from Brenton, returning frequently to the city, but never fully leaving her parents again. To her surprise, they agreed. The world had changed. Remote work was possible. What once seemed like an impossible balance now became a reality. Months passed, and Clara found herself thriving in ways she never had before. She split her time between city projects and quiet evenings at home. She worked in the mornings from her father's workshop, the ticking of old clocks her background music. She helped her mother in the afternoons, sharing laughter over garden rows. And in the evenings, she reconnected with old friends, discovering that even relationships she thought had faded could bloom again. One evening, as winter's first snow dusted the town, Clara sat with her parents by the fire. The flames crackled, casting warm light over their faces. Evelyn dozed lightly in her chair, while Samuel polished a small wooden frame. Inside it was a photograph, Clara as a child, grinning with missing teeth. Standing between her parents on the same porch where they now Saturday, Samuel handed the frame to Clara. "I kept this in the workshop all these years," he said quietly. "Every time I was angry, every time I missed you, I looked at it, reminded myself that no matter how far you went, you were still ours." Clara's throat tightened as she clutched the frame. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand," she whispered. Her father's hand rested gently on hers. "What matters is that you did." In that moment, Clara realized that the story of her life wasn't one of loss or regret, but of return and renewal. The distance she had traveled, the mistakes she had made, the years she had spent chasing something she thought she lacked, all of it had led her back here, to this fire, to these hands that had never stopped holding space for her. She smiled through her tears, leaning back into the warmth of home. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt whole, because home was not a place she had outgrown. It was the root from which she could finally grow.